About 4 ways that you can lose money in real estate, and now to the show.
Welcome to the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show, where we bring you insights into the local Central Virginia real estate market, go in depth to answer your real estate questions and concerns, and interview local figures and influencers in the greater Richmond area. And now let's get to the latest episode with your host Chris Elliott and co-host Maddie Ray.
Welcome back to the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show. I am so excited to be back on the air. Maddie, how are you doing?
I'm good. Coming back from a bit of a hiatus as well.
Yes, we did take a little bit of a hiatus, so I am super excited. The excitement is radiating off of you.
Oh boy, does it ever.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, I miss podcasting. I don't know about you, but
because you like listening to yourself talk, and you like having other people listen to you talk.
That could be. We're learning about personality flaws that I got.
It's not necessarily a flaw. It's just who you are.
No, I think that's a flaw. I think I need to. We were talking about this. I need to start meditating or doing yoga.
Oh, you do need to start doing yoga. Absolutely.
Just working on myself.
Self-improvement is important.
It is very important. Anyway, real quick before we jump into today's content, want to introduce our new podcast production manager, Lord Master of all things marketing, Mr. Jacob Augustino. How are you doing, sir?
That was quite an introduction.
Whatever you want your title to be, it can be. We'll print that on the business card. So.
I'm known around the office as the Prince of Podcasting.
The Prince of Podcasting.
So,
I like this.
That was what I was given, so I'm going to kind of roll with that for a while.
The Dutch
Who gave you that?
The Dutch of Digital?
Yes, the Dutch of Digital.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Wow.
Anyway, Jacob will throw up a headshot of himself, which he didn't want to, but now he has to because I.
Well, he can just jump in front of the camera right now and be like,
"No, let's not do that." All right. So, Maddie, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about how to lose money in real estate.
Talking about the 4 ways to lose money in real estate.
Are there only 4 ways?
There's probably more than 4 ways. And obviously that's kind of like a clickbaity type of headline. But what we really want to do is educate folks on 4 ways that people commonly lose money on real estate and what you can do to avoid it. Because obviously we're not out here teaching people, leading people towards destruction, if that makes sense.
Sure does.
Cool.
Because if we lead people towards destruction, then we don't make any money. We want them to keep their houses up, not destroy them.
Sure. Thanks. Okay. All right, Maddie, kick us off if you would.
Okay. First thing is moving in less than 5 years. Why would that lose you money?
Yeah, absolutely. So the act in itself, moving in less than 5 years, doesn't necessarily cause you to lose money. But the reason that we put this down here is what you got to look at. So when we talk about selling, the transactional costs of selling usually run about 7 to 8% when you really add up everything.
Does that include real estate agent commission?
Yeah. So you figure a traditional or historically norm real estate commission of 6%. You also get a factor, as you've seen, working with me now for a year. We celebrated our 1-year anniversary here.
January 3rd.
Yeah, it was a magical day.
We did absolutely nothing.
No, we didn't do anything.
We just were like, hey, this was the day.
Yeah, and we're like, rock on.
All right, cool.
I think you actually texted me and you're like, hey, look at this Facebook post, blah, 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 whatever, like a Facebook
Doesn't
memory.
sound like me.
Kind of does. Anyway, losing money in real estate. So you got 6% real estate commissions. You've got about, generally about 1% to 2% in seller concessions when you really look at it. Would you say that's about the norm?
Couldn't you go up to isn't it 3%?
Depends on the loan the buyers are getting, but the reality is, and the something you don't hear talked about a lot, but the reality is when you study most real estate sales, and a lot of price points, that buyer is going to expect the seller to pay some of their closing costs. We're not sitting here telling people that they should do that or that they should just roll over and give it to them. We're just telling people, hey, that's kind of the norm. So if you're going to budget, that's what I would budget for. It's about 7 to 8% of your home's value, quote unquote, is going to cost you in transactional costs. So that's the cost of selling. Historical appreciation rates are 2 to 3%. Let's call it 2.5%. So we've been in a very good market, a very good seller's market the last, I would say, coming up on almost 10 years now. I mean, we've been in the longest recovery in U.S. economics history, I think it is. So this has not been a factor as much over the last couple of years because we've been seeing 5%, 6% appreciation rates, in some areas even 7% a year appreciation. So, but when you think about it, like, okay, so if it's going to cost me 8% to move and homes are only appreciating at 2.5% per year, it takes a couple years after you buy for appreciation to wipe out any of the transactional costs associated with selling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it would at least take a couple years then to even break even, much less make a profit.
Absolutely. So it's been kind of a unique phenomenon over the last couple of years. We've been in such a good market that like first-time home buyer, you talk to somebody with a little bit of gray hair and they kind of get this because they've seen different market cycles. But our younger buyers that maybe bought with us 2-3 years ago or bought 2-3 years ago with somebody else,
we don't talk to those people.
No, we do talk to them.
I'm just kidding.
But they've not been. They've been in somewhat of a fantasy land because homes are appreciating so much that they've been able to move freely without having to think about this. And of course, exceptions to every rule, but this is something to think about. So a lot of times what happens is folks move in year 2, in year 3, sometimes even year 4, and they simply don't have the equity, don't have enough meat on the bone to really break even or even make money on their personal home. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing, last point in there, Maddie, is you are more prone to market fluctuations if you're moving in such a short time period. So, the real estate market, just like the financial markets, we go through cycles. If the market takes a dip and you move within that 5-year gap, that potentially could become an issue for you. If you're moving 20 years later, you've probably been through a couple market cycles, and that's not as much of a factor.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Kind of.
Maddie told me before we got on the air that I needed to slow down and take breaths so she can ask questions.
Yeah, because every time we do the podcast, you're like, here's this point, blah, 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 blah. And then where I get like halfway through that sentence and I'm like, oh, here's a thing I could say. And I start to look at you like I'm going to cut you off, but you just keep talking. And then at that point, there's no socially acceptable time for me to cut you off.
Yeah, it's kind of like my wife will tell you. It's kind of the same way at home, unfortunately. So once again,
that's how Charlotte is.
That's how my daughter is. She's a carbon copy of myself, which is kind
makes
of
babysitting her interesting for me.
Yeah,
because I babysit you 40 hours a week.
Yes,
and then I go babysit another smaller female version of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Maddie was kind enough to watch our daughter, our eldest daughter, the other day, and yeah, she can be a little headstrong, can't she?
Just a little. Charlotte,
darling, if you're watching this in 18 years, we love you.
She's going to be watching it now because you project your podcasts on your living room TV for your family to watch.
I do. So we've got the we've got the TV dialed into YouTube, awesome. And anytime like I turn on YouTube, it's a smart TV and everything, then it's like the video pops up and she's like, oh, that's Daddy. Let's watch that. And my wife's like, rolls her eyes. She's like, okay, yeah.
Allie sent me a picture the other day and she was like, he just can't get enough of watching himself.
Yeah, this is wow. We're learning a lot about me that I don't like today. But anyway.
Usually it's me, so we can just go ahead and roast you on the air.
This is true. What's the next topic?
Moving on. Buying new construction and moving within 10 years.
Buying new construction. So, I was going to have you, for dramatic effect, just saying buying new construction because we've got a couple folks that are buying new construction right now.
I'm sure they love it.
Yeah. So no. So general advice, general rule of thumb is if you're buying new construction, you want to make sure that you anticipate living in that home for the next 10 years. Couple factors to consider with regard to that. So buying new construction, moving 10 years, you have all the factors that we just talked about the transactional cost of selling, the historic appreciation rates, the market fluctuations. So you've got all of that plus a couple other things. So realize when you're buying new construction, and sometimes I don't think people really think through this, is new construction, you're getting a premium product, but you're also paying a premium price for said product. It's kind of like buying a new car. Like you're going to pay the most that car is
ever cost.
Well, I guess it's a little bit in real estate because homes do appreciate, but you're paying top dollar for what you're buying. So you got to keep that in mind. Builders strategically will push those prices as high as they can. So you're paying like top market price. Now a new home's a beautiful thing because everything's new. You know, you get to pick out your own finishes. You get to customize it. You know, you don't have to worry about a lot of mechanical issues or anything like that because all your mechanicals are new, your roof's new, the window's new, all of that stuff is good. But you're paying a premium price for it. The builders are pushing prices as high as they can. And it also takes longer for those homes to start appreciating because they've already been sold at top dollar. So for the market then to catch up and start the bar start moving up again, it takes a little bit longer. Does that point make sense? It made sense when I was writing this.
I mean, I have a question on that too.
Yeah.
So,
we only get 3 questions though.
Crap. You know how when you buy a new car, like it immediately starts depreciating because it's not a new car anymore? Mm-hmm. When you buy new construction, part of the appeal is like, oh, it's a house that no one's ever lived in before. It'll be mine. So doesn't like the fact that it's now a resale when you go to sell it again, doesn't that dip the value of the home?
So long term, that home will appreciate. In my experience, and it really all depends, that home potentially could dip in value. And then actually, I appreciate the layup because that segues us to our next point.
Oh, that was unintentional.
Yeah.
We can pretend it wasn't.
Yeah, no, it was super intentional. The next thing is that you got to keep in mind is when you're buying in a new construction development, depending on what phase of construction, how much room, how many more homes there are to build out in that neighborhood, you are going to be competing with new construction potentially when you go to sell. So for example, if you are in a community where they plan to build 1,000 homes, you're the first one in the community, and then you want to sell 2 years later, maybe you have a life change, maybe something happens, maybe you have a job change or something, or you just decide you want to move. Obviously life happens. We're not trying to judge people, but what you got to realize is if they just started that community and there's like 2 more sections to be built, you're going to be going toe to toe with the new construction that they are still currently building. So
because at that rate, why would they buy your resale house when they could just build their own?
Yeah. So for example, like simple numbers. So let's say you paid $300 for your house. You want to now sell it for $300. Well, now somebody can go build, the newer and get the new house where they can pick out all their finishes, all the same reasons that you bought new construction. They're going to want to now buy new construction. They don't want to buy the slightly used. They want to buy the new. And if they can get that for $325, $350, I would say 9 times out of 10, they're going to bump themselves slightly in price and they're going to go buy that brand new house. Kind of like,
I mean, at that point, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, it's true. It's the same psychology of why you bought new construction is probably going to play out with that next buyer. It's kind of like if you were buying cars and you could buy, a brand new car for $50,000, or you can buy a slightly used car for $45,000. Would you maybe just pay a little bit more to get the brand new car that Yeah,
for sure.
Same psychological effects. So that's something you got to keep in mind is all the factors that we already talked about, but then also you're going to be competing against that builder then when you go to sell potentially if they are still building in that neighborhood.
Well, plus too, it's not even that the house itself is slightly used. It's also like if you're building your own, then all your stuff is brand new then. So for example, like your roof or like your HVAC, like stuff like that. That's all new if you buy new, but then like if you were to buy someone else's resale that was new construction before them, then you have 3 years sooner that you have to replace all those big ticket items.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that HVAC unit now has 3 years on it. The roof now has 3 years on it. Here's another thing to think about too. Some of these neighborhoods get built out over 5 to 10 years. So if you buy in 2020 and then you go to sell in 2025, if there's a new section in that neighborhood, maybe the styles have changed. Maybe the trends have changed. Maybe the floor plan preferences have changed. And that new construction house is always going to have the most recent, most desirable features that people are looking for. So, you're always going to be, or you're potentially going to be competing against what the strongest demand is in. Jacob, is any of this making sense? Jacob's our resident, like somewhat new to real estate person. So
yeah, it's making perfect sense. I guess my only question would be then is how can you combat that in any way?
I don't know if you can necessarily combat it. I think it's just something you go into it with your eyes wide open. We're not telling people not to buy new construction. I mean, new construction is great. What we are telling people though is like, hey, look, if you're going in and you're buying new construction, don't buy new construction if you know you're potentially going to be moving in less than 10 years. You can't, sometimes life happens, you can't forecast that, but we've literally seen instances. Gary, our broker, had an instance with a guy last year who bought new construction and then took a job change 2 years later. And I think he knew that promotion was coming. Well, that doesn't make sense at all. Like, you're going to get your head taken off if you're going to lose money. You're going to take a bath if you buy new construction, and then, the odds aren't in your favor in that scenario. To answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. What's our next point?
Over improving for the neighborhood.
Over improving for the neighborhood. Now, do you know what we're talking about?
I sure do.
Have you kind of seen this?
I can think of a specific example, but I'm not going to throw it out here right now.
Okay.
But we have seen this.
Yeah. So when we say over improving for the neighborhood, I think a lot of people know what we're talking about when we talk about this. It's basically you're spending more money than your neighborhood will necessarily support. Spending more money improving your home than you can reasonably expect to get back is probably a good way to say this. So what does this boil down to? Installing upgrades or amenities that aren't expected in the neighborhood or the price point. Just installing like the hoobie-doobie kitchen, and maybe you're in a neighborhood where hoobie-doobie kitchens are not to be expected.
Yeah. You have hoobie-doobie other things.
Give me some examples of stuff you've seen. Maybe don't name names or addresses or get too specific, but I'm drawing a blank right here, so maybe you can help me out here. I mean, I'm just thinking like we've seen some kitchens where people have like decked out kitchens, and it just like, this makes no sense for this neighborhood, or they add a pool, or just like spend money willy-nilly, and then they just expect to get it back because you always get your money back in real estate. Or
yeah, I was mostly thinking like kitchens.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen people completely, like, redo their whole kitchen, or, like, even, like, add on, like, other rooms, or, like, tear walls down and stuff. Which, I mean, is all good and well, but you don't always get your money back for doing big things like that.
Yeah.
You always try and warn people about that, too. Like, you went on an appointment a few months ago when you went to... My sister lives in Brandermill. When you went to go see her... And she was talking about, like, her kitchen or whatever, and you were like, oh, well, it doesn't make sense to pour all that money into the kitchen.
Yeah.
So that's what we were talking about here. Because even though, like, she could pour all that money into the kitchen theoretically, like, she might not get it back, and there would be no point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so and we're not here trying to tell people how they should live, or don't say not doing it. I would say just be careful, be strategic when you're putting money into your house. Realize it's an investment decision. It's a business decision.
Plus, sometimes if you do it yourself, it can kind of look...
That's a whole different podcast for a whole nother day. But yeah,
I'm just saying, like,
I agree.
You definitely won't get your money back if you do all your own repairs and they look botched.
Yeah, this is true. If it looks rough, but I would just say, hey, if you wanna put in cool stuff, just know, like, hey, this may or may not be something, or even if you choose to do this, just know that you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment, and that it's not like, hey, I'm installing this crazy kitchen, and I should absolutely, I should get 100% of my money back, or things like that. Also, I wrote a note, realize that pricing is not simple addition, so you can't just say, hey, I bought my house for $300. I put a $50,000 kitchen in, so I should reasonably be able to sell it for $350. It doesn't always work like that, because what happens now is if you say, okay, I bought a $300,000 house, I put a $50,000 kitchen in, and now I want to sell for $350. Well, if the highest sale in the neighborhood was maybe $315, and you're now trying to get $350, number one, you're going to have tough because you're swimming against stream, but you're also now at $350, you're competing against other $350 houses that were built as $350 houses, or $350 neighborhoods that, it's just either much newer, a different neighborhood, or it's much different look and feel than maybe what you've created. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've seen that too.
Yeah. Like, I had a neighbor, Sean, if you're listening, what's up, buddy? But but we had talked about, because he, growing family, he was talking about like renovating his whole house and redoing it and changing the floor plan and all this stuff. And we really went deep into it more out of curiosity. And I was just, at the end of the day, I was telling him, I was like, look, I think if you spend all this money, you're going to create this house that's going to be like a non-conforming house. It's going to be the biggest house in the neighborhood. And that's a lot of times a very precarious spot to be, because you're going to be this huge house in this neighborhood of smaller houses. And if somebody's truly looking to buy this big house, they probably want to buy in a neighborhood of other big houses.
Yeah. And you don't want to be the best house in the neighborhood either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
as far as appreciation is concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tricky spot to be sometimes.
You would rather be the worst house in a great neighborhood than the best house in a not so great neighborhood.
That's
because, the bad ones will send your property value down.
That's right. Look at you getting all.
I know. I'm all licensed.
All licensed and stuff. So like we said, I mean, if you choose to over-improve, just know you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment. And just, I wouldn't expect to get that money back or get it back for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
We're on board.
Jacob, are we still on track?
Still on track.
Still on track. You're still
learning
following?
a lot.
Okay. Good deal. Laddie, Laddie.
Wow. That's the second time you've messed up my name today.
I called you Matter before.
No, you called me Mather.
Mather.
A THUR that has no place in my name.
Mather, what is last on our agenda today?
Spending money on upgrades that aren't universally accepted. Wow.
Do you agree with that?
I mean, it's just a sentence.
It's on the. Do you know what I'm referring to there?
I imagine like really random bougie stuff, probably, right?
Yeah, you've seen a couple of those in our dealings, have you not?
I have.
Yeah. So okay, so I wrote some examples. Once again, we're not trying to judge. We're not trying to make fun of people. We're not trying to be.
We do that off camera.
Yeah, we do that off camera. But no, what we want to do is we want to just educate people of like, hey, if you put this stuff in your house, like realize like once again, just kind of like over improving, you're doing, and these go hand in hand, you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment, but you may not get that money back. I'll give you some examples. If you have very, very specific decor, I'm not going to name specific styles, but if you go with something super, super particular to yourself, and then is that not like universally accepted as in vogue, that could potentially be a problem for you when you go to sell.
Like a clown painting that's bolted to the wall and you can't get it off.
Did we have one of those?
No, it's in the office.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay.
It was. It's been... Okay, well, I'm not going to lay the whole thing out for you, but it's part of the office.
So I will tell a funny story because it wasn't one of our listings. We went into a house with the Arsenias, Kelsey, Justin. How are you guys doing? It was super weird. The guy had like satanic decor / paintings.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Jacob, I think he needs to go to church.
Yeah. Would not be stepping in without some holy water.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. One of those smoke balls, right? Yeah.
Oh, what about that thing that you saw at the house that, like, remember the wipes your sins thing that you saw at the house?
Oh, that was pretty funny, though.
You could have just brought that there and then boom, two birds, one stone.
Just some hand soap. No, but that was like an extreme example. But so what are we talking about? Upgrades that aren't universally appreciated. Very specific decor, security systems. I recently went on an appointment where a guy had a $6,000 security system. He was former military. It was important to him, and that's great. But I would say John Q. Public, your average home buyer, is not going to find the value in a $6,000 high-end hoobie-doobie security system.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of. I mean, it was a really cool system, but at the end of the day, like, is somebody else going to be willing to pay you for that?
You can buy a Ring doorbell and pay like $50 and call it a day.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. He valued the security, which I can understand. He's probably seen some crazy stuff. I don't want to go into what he told me, but like I can appreciate he can do that. I think somebody else with his background would absolutely find the value in that security system. But I think the other 99% of the world probably wouldn't. Is probably not going to say, hey, I'm going to pay you extra for your house because you have this hoobie-doobie security system. Does that make sense? So it was that. I've seen where I've recently had an appointment where somebody had installed a sidewalk. The city, it was in Richmond City. The city wasn't doing a good job, so they went ahead and jumped the gun and installed a sidewalk in their property. So
vigilante of them.
Yeah. But once again, like, I don't know that somebody's going to pay you for the fact that your property has a sidewalk that...
I see on here that you have something about koi ponds, and I've just been sitting on this and dying to say this.
Yeah.
We've had, I'm not going to be specific or state anything too specific, but we've had some clients that really very heavily valued their backyard and the very specific plants and scenery and pond and gazebo and all that good stuff in their backyard.
Yeah.
And that was very important to them.
Yeah.
But you and I were kind of just like, well, it is important, but there's more important things.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I showed a property where they had this elaborate koi pond, and I'm sure once again for the right person, for the right demographic, or the right segment of people, or the right, a small percentage of people would very much find value in that. But I think the majority of today's consumers would not find the value in that. They would say, oh man, that's something that I've got to upkeep and this is going to be a whole lot of work. Or even if they think it's cool, they're like, hey, it's cool, but I'm not going to pay you an extra 25 grand above market value because you've got this elaborate backyard thing. So once again, stuff like that, just be careful with it of, hey, like, does the neighborhood support it? And then is this something that's going to be universally appreciated? Things that are universally appreciated: kitchen renovations within reason, bathroom renovations within reason, neutral tones, paint, carpet, and flooring and things like that. You're laughing at me right now.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at what I'm about to say.
What are you about to say?
Sometimes people spend upwards of like $5 or $6 grand on all new blinds for their house.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, we had a client that, spent way too much money on blinds and then got upset because the home wasn't selling and all this stuff. We didn't recommend that he spent the money on the blinds. But once again, we're not here to make fun, but it's just be mindful when you're spending money in your property of, hey, either I'm doing this as an investment or I'm doing this knowing that I'm not going to get that money back. So just something to think about when you're dropping money into your property. If you treat it like an asset, it will treat you like an asset. If you just, spend money willy-nilly, it might be a little tougher to get that money back.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So now we are going to jump to the fire round. Jacob, what questions did we get from the social mediums?
Okay. So first question would be, how do you make money flipping a house if it's less than 5 years then?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're flipping a house, you definitely want to flip it in less than 5 years. I think, if you talk to most guys, they want to be in and out in a house in 6 months or less, in your standard house. You make money on the buy is the short answer. So when you're buying, most guys will say, you want to take the formula for flipping is you want to figure out the ARV. So what is the house going to be worth when I'm all said and done with it? You then take that number, you multiply it by 0.7. So you have a 30% margin for all your soft cost, insurance, your financing charges, and then you have your profit margin in there as well. And then, so you take ARV times 0.7 and then subtract the repairs cost. So, if you kind of look at that on paper, you realize like, oh, I really got to buy this thing cheap to actually make money.
Cool. Second question. What are some sensible upgrades to make in those, I guess, lower income neighborhoods or not as fancy neighborhoods?
Great question. I love the enthusiasm. Yeah. Jacob is not you don't get excited very easily, I can tell.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, which is fine.
You've accused me of being the same way.
No, but you do get excited about stuff, or at least I've seen it. Anyway, this is a fire round, so I'm going to keep it short. So what was the question again?
What are some sensible upgrades?
Sensible upgrades. Okay. So generally, like what we'll do if a client reaches out to us and they say, hey, like, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? Our process is what we'll do is we're going to look at what are the top price homes in the neighborhood or like kind of yours. And then what do those homes look like? So like, hey, they've gone this far or they've done kitchens like this and they're actually selling for they spent X, now they're selling for Y, so it's kind of like that proof of concept is there. And then I would either upgrade to that standard or slightly below. So you don't want to be like the innovator that is on the bleeding edge of innovation of like, hey, I'm going to spend all this money and then I'm going to be the one, the guinea pig and see if we're able to recoup it. So I would try to renovate within what's actually selling in the neighborhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you're going to buy a fridge, get the $1,000 fridge, not the $3,000 fridge.
Unless you're in a neighborhood where
it demands that.
Yeah. Right. But if you're in like a lower price point and the homes, the top homes that are actually selling are only buying that $1,000 fridge, then I don't know that I would go above that $1,000 fridge.
Cool. Third question. Would it be worth installing a pool to add value?
Ooh, good question. I would say it all depends.
Above ground or in ground?
Yeah, really. So once again, I would look at the neighborhood and make a quality decision as far as does the neighborhood support it. So if you're in a lower price point neighborhood where there's nobody has a pool and then you go install a pool, you may not get that money back because depending on how much that pool costs you, it may not bump your value that much. Pools are kind of like a tricky thing too. It's like, it's one of those where it's in the middle as far as like, do people like pools and do people not like pools? I think people with small children tend to not like pools because of the safety aspect. The higher end, you tend to recoup some of that money. But the low end, in my experience, you tend not to get that money back.
Cool.
Yeah. So once again, not saying don't do a pool, but just know you're spending that money for your own enjoyment and it may not be money you get back.
All right. Next question. Ready? Mm-hmm. It's a little personal.
Oh boy. What
would be your unacceptable upgrade? Something you just throw money at.
Like in my personal house?
In your personal house.
Okay. Maddie, what would you do?
You're supposed to answer the question also.
I'm passing it over to you. What would you do?
Okay. I would get
I think of mine.
Well, you eventually have to come up with an answer.
It's a fire round, so let's go.
I would get the bougiest, craziest jetted tub in the whole world for no reason whatsoever.
Okay. Like a soaking tub?
Yeah, like, the ones the Arsenias have?
Yeah, they
it's like a nice, like in the corner. There's like a window above it. I would trick that out even more.
Like candles.
I'd get a bigger one, like
Michael Bublé in the background.
Yeah, I'd have Michael Bublé like on retainer to just like.
Oh, like he'd just be standing in the bathroom.
Get him a glass cage in my bathroom.
He'd just be standing in the other side of the bathroom singing.
Correct.
With the Mr. Microphone.
Yes, that's what I would spend all my money on.
Okay, not as fun. I'd probably get like a nice backyard fire pit.
Boo.
Whatever. Simple pleasures. Okay.
Boo.
I'm not keeping anybody in a glass case or doing weird stuff like that.
I just realized how weird that sounded.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's fine.
All right, guys. That was the wrap on that show, How to Lose Money in Real Estate. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you'd like more of this content, if you're on YouTube, hit the bell. If you're watching somewhere else, hit subscribe. Chris Elliott RE is our handle on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, I believe even LinkedIn. So we appreciate you guys following. If you would like to ask questions on the fire round, make sure that you do so via our Instagram stories and also our Facebook business stories, I believe. Every single Tuesday, we're doing those. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for joining us for the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please contact Chris Elliott at chris@chriselliottrealestate.com or by phone at 804-980-1898. And please join us again next time for the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show.